Hi, Councillor Farrelly. How you doing?
Yeah, hi. Look, I haven't done a test yet, but I'll do one shortly just to make sure. Yeah, it just felt a bit hot, so better not to be there than be there, I thought.
No worries. Councillor Farrelly, just be aware that there are people in the council chamber here, members of the public.
Oh, I'll be quiet.
Councillor Farrelly, would you be able to turn your camera on just for a second, please?
Oh, I haven't got it on. Sorry about that.
That's right. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey everyone, could I ask you all to take your seats, please? Councillors and visitors, please remember to switch your electronic devices to silence. And welcome everybody. I'd also like to welcome those viewers who are at home watching the meeting via the live stream tonight. Tonight's meeting is being held both in person and via Zoom. Masks must be worn at all times in the council chamber unless addressing the meeting. Please be patient if any technical difficulties arise and they'll be dealt with as quickly as possible. If you wish to speak on an item, please raise your hand so that it can be clearly seen. And when it's time to vote on an item, please keep your hand raised until your vote has been confirmed. If I could now ask everyone to be upstanding, and Councillor Proud, if I could please ask you to read out the opening prayer.
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask this in your name. Amen.
And could I ask you to stay standing up, and Councillor Sandri, if you could please read out the acknowledgement of country.
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can take your seats. Thanks everyone. That brings us to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I now declare the council meeting of the 5th of April 2022 open at 6:31 p.m. Item 2, attendance and apologies. I do have an apology this evening from Councillor Thornton. In person, we have all councillors. Councillor Farrelly, however, is on Zoom tonight. All other councillors are in the chamber. That's all right. Item 3, approved leave of absence. I have nil. Item 4, disclosure of interest. I have disclosures from Councillor Felicity Farrelly, disclosed an impartial interest in item 13.1 as she has her home in Scarborough and is a beneficiary of a deceased estate. Councillor Farrelly also disclosed a financial interest in item 13.2 as she awaits legal opinion. Her home is in the master plan area and she is a beneficiary of a deceased estate. I also have a disclosure in item 13.2. It's an impartial interest as my mum lives on the boundary of the master plan area. Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have an impartial interest in item 13.1 and 13.2 as I am the local government committee member for Development WA Scarborough.
Thank you. Is there any other indications? No. Thank you. I will go on then to item 5, petitions. Item 5.1, an e-petition to oppose Green Street media enclosure at Tyler Street and Meriden Street. Councillor Olo, if you'd like to stand and read that out, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's an e-petition oppose Green Street medium closure at Tyler Street and Meriden Street. The City has received the following e-petition containing 253 verified signatures. We, the undersigned, oppose the closure of Green Street medium at Tyler Street and Meriden Street. We request that the Council considers the following issues with these proposed changes. There's 7 issues. Speed contributes to the frequency and severity of accidents at this location and without crossing traffic. Vehicle speed may increase. 2, local traffic may be forced to use the Stonehand and Green Street intersection to turn right onto Green Street. This is another black spot with poor visuality. Pardon me. Enham Lane will be used by people who want to turn onto Green Street. 4, Jundana residents will create additional traffic throughout Mount Hawthorn, including Matlock, Bondi and Blackford. 5, vehicles drive around the Waterloo Street medium closure is an unsafe and illegal way. 6, to access freeway residents will need to use Main Street intersection that are also black spots. 7, the redevelopment of the intersection of Green Street and Scarborough Beach Road needs to be completed first. The proposed chain inhibits access, forces traffic to use poor alternative routes and intersections, and this doesn't slow the Green Street traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. And item 5.2, an e-petition, opposition against Greenacre Pimlott Street Dianella Childcare Centre. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the e-petition is opposition against Greenacre Pimlott Street Childcare Centre DA21/1245. The following e-petition contains 119 verified signatures and has been received by the City, and it states, we the undersigned do respectfully request that the Council, the reasons for the opposition to this development include, one, in the residents' opinion, the amendments are limited, reducing capacity from 56 to 50 children. Two, the proposal states a two-storey building which is not in keeping with the local area. And three, the building is too large on a small-scale block. That's basically it.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any other unverified petitions you'd like to present this evening? No? If not, can I get a mover? Moves Councillor Sandri, seconded Councillor Perkoff, and just a show of hands to accept those petitions, please. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. One question was taken on notice at the last council meeting. The response is on page 9 of the agenda. Item 7, public question time. I will now move on to that. And to start us off, I'm happy to invite Lynn Noack forward, if you'd like to come forward. And if you start off by pressing that microphone button and turning it on for us, thank you. And you're welcome to remove your mask while you're speaking, just so we can hear you clearly. Name and suburb, and then your question, please.
Lynn Noack, Karen Up. Good evening again, everybody. Right. The new advertising signage for the viewing tower to be constructed at Canaveral is facing the roundabout inside the car park where nobody can read it unless they stand in the middle of the internal road and run the gauntlet of the cars, which is not terribly healthy. I have photos to provide to anyone who wishes to see them. Or possibly safety officers can be sent around to evaluate the safety and the value of such signage. Clearly, this signage is an advertisement for the next unnecessary erection at Canaveral, regardless of the safety. So, question 1. Can the council do something constructive about the signage or advertising for developments so that it is not deliberately obscured from easy public viewing, which is clearly the case for this current viewing platform?
Mr. Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Noak, for your question. I did visit the site today, and it did take me a number of times to go around the car park to find actually where the sign was. In saying that, I can confirm that the sign is not in a conspicuous position on the site, and we will go back to the applicant to get them to relocate the sign appropriately on that site. At the same time, we'll also request an extension to the advertising period from the applicant when those signs are in place. So, yes, it was a good find today.
Thank you. It took
Well
a
done.
long time to find it, believe me. Will the council, in that case, consider the safety aspects of such a viewing platform? Because with the many drunks that are coming out of Canaveral every Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights, I've recorded them too. And one even caused an accident on Milverton, which meant the rest of us lost our electricity for the entirety of the next day. Is such a viewing platform really necessary for all of those drunks just to have a few more antics?
Mr. Rodich.
Thanks, Ms Noak, for the question. The viewing application is still under assessment at the moment. I'm aware that during the weekends it's open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and during the week you require an appointment. We are seeking further information from the applicant to determine how they will, I guess, provide a safe environment on that platform for those viewing, but also others who may want to try to get into the platform. Usually platforms on such sites are fenced and gated and opened only by usually an agent at those times, but we are going through that process, and we'll make sure that all those safety measures are in place before we determine the proposal.
Thank you. And the last one. Is it possible that the council can even suggest to Blackburn that in this day and age, drones and or VR equipment is much safer and much cheaper and possibly give better 360-degree views?
Mr Rodich?
Yes, we can, Ms Noah, we can suggest that. However, when reading the covering letter, they believe that the most value they get out of their sites is providing a physical platform to, provide a purchaser with, I guess, a feel for the views from the site. But look, drones are an option, and I'm sure they would have looked at that, but they have proposed that, and we must consider the application before us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Ellis? Your name and suburb, thank you.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors and staff and fellow ratepayers. Can I inquire, when you purchase new motor passenger carrying vehicles, do you charge the ratepayers the full price of $6,242,657 as listed on page 193 of the annual report of 2019-20 and not credited the disposal amount of $2,642,204?
Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Ellis. We do build a reserve to replace our fleet replacement, so we're not seeing an impact on the ratepayers every year for that. So we do use our consumption from our depreciation that helps us build that reserve, so then we're able to manage that spend without having the impact on the ratepayer.
Okay, thank you. On page 177 of the annual report, 2019-20, it lists staff expenses at $1,722,424, and on page 182 it lists staff costs at $84,460,448. Can you please advise what the difference is apart from $16,264,764? Thank you.
Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Ellis. The difference between the figures is the higher figure is the actual cash amount, whereas the employee expenses take into account recharges around our salaries that we would charge, for example, onto capital projects and the like. But the higher figure is the actual cash amount.
Ooh, we have a cash account, eh? Can you please advise where the minutes are from the March 2022 electors meeting, please?
Yes, Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The minutes are currently being transcribed and prepared, and we do expect to have them out to the community shortly, and we'll make everyone who was in attendance at that meeting aware when those minutes are published.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors?
Julie Jacobs? Thank you. Just, if you'd like to take your mask off, if that's okay, and just your name and suburb to start.
Sorry.
That's right.
Julie Jacobs in Coolbinia. My question is related to the Canaveral Crescent footpath that has caused many of us such distress and sadness, but anyway.
Yeah, if you could pull that down a little bit, that'd be good. Yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, there, much better,
thank you.
thanks.
Why has there been no cost analysis completed comparing the two sides of Canaveral Crescent for a proposed footpath, noting a majority of Canaveral Crescent residents raised concerns by petition more than 4 months ago?
Mr Guillemot, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, initially we didn't prepare a cost estimate because our process is that we'll undertake the site investigation, determine which side of the road is the more appropriate side, and then undertake the detailed design and then prepare the cost estimate based on that design. We don't do a cost estimate for options that we don't consider to be viable. Having said that, today we did undertake a preliminary cost estimate for the footpath on the southern side of the road, which we still maintain we don't believe is a viable option. And based on the adverse grades that are on the southern side of the road and the locations where we believe retaining would be required to accommodate a footpath on that side of the road, the cost would be in the order of an extra $100,000 to $150,000 for the retaining, and that's based on the length that we believe and the linear metre rate that we have in our contracts.
Thank you. Your second question, please.
Our council is aware that whilst the proposed footpath on Canaveral Crescent will pass 31 households, hundreds of other households on the side streets will need to cross Canaveral Crescent to access it, and they were never consulted about the proposed location.
Mr. Guillemot?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, we do appreciate that the number of households on the side roads. There are quite a few households along those side roads, and that they would need to cross Canaveral Crescent to get to Footpath on the northern side of the road. But what is probably not being picked up is wherever they're going, travelling east or west, they would still need to cross more streets, side roads on the southern side of the road. So yes, they would need to cross Canaveral Crescent to get to a footpath on the northern side, but if footpath was on the southern side, they would still need to cross a number of side roads to get to their ultimate destination. So we didn't consider that to be an overriding factor.
Thank you. And your third question?
Our council is aware users of the proposed footpath on Canaveral Crescent will traverse 31 crossovers versus just 5, 3 of which are secondary crossovers, on the other side of the road.
Yes. Yes, that's certainly been presented to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Brood?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Jeff Brodie, Corbinia. So, again, the same sort of a thing. Are councillors aware that situated a few hundred metres to the north is Minar Crescent, which, like Canaveral Crescent, is a semicircle with a road forming a ring around an island of homes with minor streets radiating outwards from the ring, and that the footpath on this street was wisely built in the outer ring with only 2 crossover impacts versus more than 20 on the inner ring?
I would say yes. There's certainly been some emails received from members of the public indicating that, so I'm sure councillors have read that.
Okay. Is there any concern?
But that will be an item for council to consider this evening, and I'll take that on board.
Are councillors aware the location of the footpath on Minar Crescent benefits the greatest number of residents by ensuring all residents from the radiating side streets have convenience access to it?
Thank you. Mr. Guillemot, are you happy to provide some advice on that?
I guess the only comment was we note that that's your view. We still believe that the footpath will provide benefits to the community if it was constructed the northern or southern side of the road.
So, Mr. Mayor, why has there been no justification given to the residents of Canaveral Crescent for the change of location of their footpath compared to Minar Crescent?
Thank you for that question. Look, I believe officers have met on site several times with residents, and I know there's been justification, and there's certainly information in the report, a lot of information in the report this evening that council will take on board and consider when they look at this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deirdre Allen? Thank you.
Councillors, ratepayers. My name's Deirdre Allen of Canaveral Crescent. We've just mentioned it. I was the lead petitioner in the petition that many of the residents signed, and I'm just commenting on process and paperwork because there's been an awful lot of mistakes from the council. I received notification that the petition was submitted, and then after that, nothing. I'm not I'm not experienced in these matters, but I've just found out that you can find out on the internet, and the petition was considered closed and a response letter was sent. But it wasn't sent to me, the lead petitioner. So I never knew anything about this letter because it was sent to one of the petitioners who assumed that everybody was getting it. So I was unable to forward the letter on to the rest of the petitioners. So, and I, to this day, haven't seen what the letter says. That was the first thing. The second thing in all this paperwork, as I've said before, the drawings are 2.5 years old. And there was plenty of time to talk to residents. The only way I found out was October last year that it was happening. It's not up to me. I'm not a community representative. It's not up to me to tell all the residents what's going on, but I had to because nobody else was. And then you send us 14 days notice of construction. We come down here to talk to council at the electors meeting and manage to have the work suspended. And then 8 days later, it's brought before council, obviously to reverse it. And are you aware in the agenda of the meeting, the drawings are not the same as the ones that were sent to the residents. There are alterations at property 20 and property 52. That seems just, goodness sake. Also, I was advised that it was coming up at this meeting, and I was told that it would be in the agenda on last Friday. Nothing has been available till this Monday, and the agenda is 180 pages long, so we've had about 32 hours to look at it. Do the councillors think that this tale is acceptable? Is some of it even acceptable under legislation?
Yes.
Really? Okay, the second one I had, I've only obviously had 32 hours to look at this. I've seen the tabulated justification from presumably your engineering department, and some of it is just ridiculous. And I've obviously, I've only got 3 questions, so I cannot go through the list of what's going on. But one thing for the councillors to consider, one of the comments, it's about abutting land use, and it says, the continuous footpath, will you use it to educate drivers, who are obviously the ratepayers, on how to use crossovers? I don't know about other ratepayers, but I think this is downright rude. Really, how are people thinking about the ratepayers, the people that pay the salaries of the employees?
Miss Allen, have you got a question?
Yes. Do councillors consider this is an acceptable attitude to their ratepayers?
I think you're probably taking one comment out of context of a report. I'm happy with the way officers have spent countless hours consulting with yourself, particularly over this matter, and answering your questions.
But they only consulted with me because I raised it. Nothing came from the council to arrange meetings or anything like that. And I have actually changed my third question after hearing about what your reply to somebody else. The retaining wall issue and how much it's going to cost, I don't agree with that, because if you notice on the north side where the driveways are, the council have built a retaining wall around the bus stop. Whereas on the south side, all that's happened is they've put fill in and contoured the land, and the bus stop was quite acceptable like that. And for the majority of the whole south side, there isn't a steep slope. There's less than I actually thought when I walked over there. So the need for retaining walls and an extra cost when they're going to have to diamond saw cut through concrete on most of the driveways and upset a lot of residents. There's the comparison in construction. I just can't believe it, what your engineering department just said. So, but can councillors honestly see myself and other residents of Canaveral Crescent voting for them after this?
Well, I think, Miss Allen, I don't know if threatening to vote is a great way to go about making decisions tonight. Council will certainly take on board your comments. You've been heard, you've been listened to.
I don't care, because I'm never going to do this again, I hope.
No, Miss Allen, but I do have to just clarify, it wasn't council who put the limestone blocks around the bus stops. That's done by the PTA as disability access.
Due to the fall, it was necessary. They couldn't have just put fill or anything and contoured the land.
But I will get clarification on that one if I can through Mr. Guillemot, because I believe that will be removed and there'll be a better outcome for that bus stop. Mr. Guillemot.
Yes, through the chair, I can confirm those works done at the bus stops were done by the PTA. They were done unilaterally by the PTA without consultation with us, and it's putting in that kind of retaining at that bus stop wouldn't have been something that we supported. We were contacted by one of the abutting landowners once when that work was undertaken, and we told them, and we have included into the plan that we will basically remove those limestone blocks around that particular bus stop, and we're able to do that by putting in the footpath and then grading the verge back. So I can confirm that there will be no retaining on the northern side if the footpath goes ahead on that side.
So if you're able to do that on the north side, grading it, there's less gradient on the south side,
Thanks,
so it would be
Miss-
easy enough to
Miss
do on
Allen.
that side.
We will bring that up during the debate this evening, I'm sure. Paul Collins. And just before you do start, Ms Collins, I will extend question time as we've exceeded the initial time frame. And over to you.
Good evening, Mr Mayor. Paul Collins of Dianella and property owner in Minar Crescent. My questions are in relation to item 13.3, the proposed footpath on Canaveral Crescent. The proposed footpath along Canaveral Crescent as it intersects with Bradford Street is at a very steep gradient. The plans posted to residents 2 weeks ago do not show any ramp. Can the CEO confirm that the footpath gradient at this location is less than 5%, i.e. 1 in 20, and therefore not requiring the expense of a ramp?
Thank you. Mr Guillemot.
I can confirm that we've been on site and we've done measurements, and the ramp, the grade of the connection from the footpath to the existing footpath on Bradford Street will be the same grade as the grade of the existing footpath on Bradford Street. That's probably not making sense, but the existing footpath on Bradford Street will be at a similar grade to what this connection will be.
So there's no
no
ramp proposed, Mr Collins.
I work in the property industry, and isn't there a requirement for new footpaths to comply with the Australian Roads Guide?
Mr Guillemot.
Part 6A, 2021.
You're referring to the Austroads Guide, not the Australian Road Guide? Yep. It is a guideline. It's not a legal document. We will try to comply with all requirements as much as practically possible. Sometimes there are topography issues that cannot be overcome, but as I said, the existing footpath on Bradford Street has a gradient that hasn't caused any issues, and that similar grade will be for that connection. So we don't foresee any issues with that connection.
Bradford Street doesn't curve around like a chute. My second question, Mr Mayor, is can the CEO advise whether retaining walls are required for the proposed footpath along Canaveral Crescent to ensure that the city does not exceed the mandatory cross-fall gradient of 2.5%, i.e. 1 in 40, for a curbside footpath next to a road? That's mandatory for a curbside footpath next to a road, not more than 2.5%, in accordance with the Australian Ausroads Guide, Road Design Part 6A 2021. And, if so, identify which property verges require retaining and whether residents adjacent to those properties have been advised of the need for retaining.
Thank you. Mr Guillemot.
Through the Chair, put simply, I can confirm that there is no retaining required for a footpath on the northern side, and we're able to build it with the required crossfall.
Thank you, Mr Collins.
Can the CEO give an assurance that the proposed footpath along Canaveral Crescent will not exceed the budgeted figure in tonight's report of $207,000? And if not, then why not?
Thank you. Mr Guillemot.
Through the Chair, when we're developing the cost estimates, we do build in contingencies. So we are confident I can never give you a 100% guarantee, but we're confident that we're able to deliver the project within the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Collins. Bob Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Do you want to take your mask off, if that's okay?
Bob Mitchell from Canaveral. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, council officers and fellow ratepayers. I've got a couple of questions here. I've got nothing that is exemplary. I'm just a ratepayer, as you know. Anyway, my first question is, the last paragraph of the answer to my question 1 last week indicated that chopping up concrete to plant trees would be necessary, as quoted here. And I'll say, in terms of the city's administration building, council will take on board those comments. There's a lot of concrete out there. Could I ask the person that made that comment in the council what they mean?
I think I was the one who responded to that, Mr. Mitchell. Sorry? I think I was the one who responded to you on that question.
Okay, Mayor.
My understanding was when you brought it up, was that you would like to see a lot more greenery, and you asked us to, for the front of the building, to better represent what we're trying to achieve in terms of our urban canopy and greening. And my comment was in agreement with you, saying, yes, it's a very bland concrete front out there. So it was a supportive comment.
Thank you. Now, has not that area of concrete have a car park below?
No.
Why is it there?
It's a forecourt of the building.
So all it is just covering up dirt?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go further. I'm saying that the trees that go there, the concrete doesn't have to be chopped up. You can put in planter boxes, brought in on pallets with trucks, and are seasonable. And I'll just read out exactly what I mean. Trees can be brought in on seasonal basis and changed around in pots on pallets. The City of Perth can do it. Why can't the City of Stirling? Just before summer, as the buds appear on deciduous trees in spring, trees of adequate size maintained in large pots at the council nursery or elsewhere off-site. They can be loaded onto a truck, taken and positioned in the courtyard. Conversely, other trees that are there replaced or possibly added to in summer. This maintains a cycle of shade. Deciduous trees just before the start of autumn replaced with another non-deciduous variety, thus having to rake and remove deciduous leaves is not necessary. No removal of concrete, just a pleasant shade environment. You know?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I'm proposing, and I'll just see what happens.
Oh, that's appreciated.
But this goes back to when I was questioning this business about the canopy in the City of Stirling.
Sure.
And what happened at the Mount Lolly Golf Course. Anyway, I'll go on to question 2. The answer below for question 2, 22nd of March 2002 council meeting. Highlighted was removal of specific and only plinth I questioned, and you, Mayor, inspected it with me. That plinth remains. Myself and others perceive it as dangerous and should not be in that position on a public verge in that configuration. Now existing traffic has a further impediment, that being a temporary construction fence next to where traffic oncoming from the right is difficult to sight approach on Davenport Street from the parking Undercroft driveway. I would like to thank Councillor Kristovic for raising the whole matter. I wish this matter to be recorded as well as below, and what I've put in there is the, I want it in the minutes, the question 2 of the meeting of the 22nd of March, verbatim. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, my next question.
Question 3.
Sorry?
Question 3.
Question 3, yes. Yes. Where is the funding coming from for item 31.1 of tonight's agenda regarding council submission on Main Roads WA concept plan, West Coast Highway proposed redevelopment?
Are you asking where the funding for the actual project will come from?
Well, what you've got in there tonight was what your proposal is to put to the Main Roads Department. And
Yes.
there's been a lot of officers working on it. Who's going to pay for that?
Sorry, I just need a clarification. Are you asking for officer time, what that costs to put that submission together, or the actual
Yeah,
project?
who's going to pay for it?
The city will pay for it. Ratepayers will pay for it.
Oh, please, Mayor. The word "the city" usually constitutes the council and the administration. We're the ratepayers here. Who finances this place?
Yeah, I just acknowledge that, Mr. Mitchell, but I think it's perfectly appropriate for a significant infrastructure project that will cost the state and federal governments, I'm guessing when they finally commit some money, well over $1 billion, that this city has representation for its ratepayers in the coastal ward, and specifically others who traverse that area, to put in a best case scenario. I think it's entirely appropriate officers will provide comment.
Why isn't it being funded by the state and federal government?
The project is, Mr. Mitchell. This was just a report in addressing the comment period.
All right. Okay, I just raised the point.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah.
Thanks for your questions.
Now,
Mr. Mitchell, that's...
I've got another part of this whole thing in relation to what is going to happen to the ex-Gordons and Stevenson Highway easement beyond John Sanders Drive and Savita Street in Swanbourne. Now, I know that's not all part of the City of Stirling.
Yeah. So
it's been there for 58 years.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So you'd have to take that up with the state member.
Sorry?
You'd have to take that up with the state member. There's nothing the City of Stirling is looking towards Savita Street.
Well, I'll get to the next one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. You've done about 5 questions so far. No, please, sir.
Mayor?
No, Mr.
Why
Mitchell.
can't I ask questions in relation
Mr. Mitchell,
to
they're all
the
very
movement
different
of
questions. We have a
vehicles?
significant agenda, and I'm aware there's people in the gallery who've been fair with their questions, and they'll be expecting us to debate them. Please, Mr. Mitchell, behave yourself. Richard Curry. I have received the question in writing, so I wasn't sure if he was going to be here. So I have a question from Richard Curry of North Beach. The Access and Inclusion Working Group provide advice to the City and encourages appropriate consideration of the City of Stirling Access and Inclusion Plan 21 to 25 when reviewing submissions such as Canaveral Crescent Footpath proposal. Outcomes within the plan specifically reference the provision of footpaths and accessibility parking. Does Council agree that amongst its competing priorities, the interests of people with disability deserve the highest consideration to ensure their quality of life in the city is optimised in all aspects of planning for physical access to the built and natural environment? This includes provision of footpath and footpath networks within our suburbs. And that will be taken on notice and a response provided in writing. And I have Luke Sloromersky. Is Luke here? Sorry, I didn't pronounce that well, did I?
Slavomersky, but he's not here.
Okay, so I have received those in writing as well. And the question is relating to Canaveral Crescent. I understand there is some vocal opposition to the footpath proposed on the northern side of Canaveral Crescent, Kilbinia. My question is whether any residents have explicitly supported the construction of the footpath as proposed. For the record, my wife and I, who have 2 children under 6, believe that a footpath is long overdue on Canaveral Crescent and are strongly in favour of the footpath being built on the northern side of the street. Mr. Guillemot, do you want to provide a response?
Through the chair, just briefly, I guess in response to the direct, we have received some support from a number of residents who've indicated their support for a footpath on the northern side.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? That's all I've got on record. Yeah, up the back. Yes. I'll start at the back. Thank you. And your name and suburb?
Simon Ehrenfeld, 50 Canaveral Crescent, Coolbinya. So you can guess what I'm going to ask about. So the first question is, and in saying this, I would like to acknowledge the enormous work done by Councillors Franti and Migdale and some others in relation to listening to the concerns on Canaveral Crescent. But with that, I would still like someone to explain the process between the electors' meeting and the commencement of works.
Sure. So the electors' meeting, as everyone or many of you may well be aware, was held last Monday. The works were actually proposed to be started today. I think they were today. There was a crossover. Obviously, the contractors were already engaged to do the project. I believe many residents, in fact, probably received the start of works and notifying them that the works would start. Whilst council isn't obliged to act on a motion from an electors' meeting, they're not binding on council. Due to the nature of so many motions coming from the electors' meeting, then they proposed to come to the council meeting of the 10th of May. This and one other motion, because of the nature of them, it was seen as beneficial to bring them forward. We had contractors on hold waiting for this, and so that's why this item was brought forward and everyone who was interested in it was notified about it. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, I understand. So you've prioritised. Okay, thanks.
It didn't seem appropriate when we got contractors on hold to hold this over when it could be brought forward and be dealt with now.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So I suppose the second question is, given the additional safety benefits of moving pedestrians as far from boundary walls as possible due to reversing cars, has the idea of gaining 2 feet by making the paths a minimum width of 1.2 metres been considered?
Mr. Jumov?
Through the chair, thank you for your question. 1.8 metres is the preferred or the desirable minimum width for a footpath for a number of reasons. It's written in our council policy. It's written in the Austroads Guide, which is an industry standard practice. And the reason being, it's also written in an Australian standard designed for access and mobility, because 1.8 metres is wide enough for 2 people in a wheelchair to pass. And while the likelihood of 2 people in a wheelchair passing may be low, it is also wide enough to allow, for instance, 2 people or 2 parents with prams to be able to pass each other. So reducing it down to 1.2 metres is a path width that the city no longer constructs. We've obviously moved the path away from property boundaries to the road to avoid the issue that you described. In doing so, we would prefer to have a wider footpath, not only for that design for access and mobility, but also with recent legislation that allows cycling on footpaths and the increasing use of e-ridables. We believe a narrower path of 1.2 wouldn't be able to accommodate all of those movements safely.
Okay, thank you. And the third question is whether adequate consideration has been given to the draft deviation from the curb proposed around 52 Canaveral Crescent and the effects of the path on the nearby bus stop as well.
Mr. Gemov?
Sorry, just to clarify, the deviation around number 52 around the tree?
To 52, it's also coming up past 50 our place as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the tree, and then there's a bus stop a few doors down that
Yes.
apparently wreaked a bit of havoc as well, but yeah.
Obviously, or not obviously, the plan was initially designed to obviously try and minimise tree loss as much as practically possible. Council obviously has the power to make a decision whether that path goes through and the tree is removed and then replaced. But from an officer perspective, we designed the plan to be able to retain the tree as much as practically possible. So there is a possibility that the path can go through if that's what council wishes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, up the front, if you'd like to stand up. I think there was...
My name is Arthur Mastillis. I live at 32 Canaveral Crescent, Kilbinia. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and council staff. The proposed footpath along Canaveral Crescent is just under 800 metres in length, and that the budgeted figure of 207,000 equates to a cost of more than 250,000 per kilometre. Is this the most expensive suburban footpath the city has ever laid on a linear metre basis, and how does it compare with other locations of similar distance in the city?
Scarily, it's probably not. Mr. Gamoff?
Thank you for your question. I have undertaken an analysis of all the footpaths on our current budget, and the linear rate for this footpath is actually very close to what the average rate is for all footpaths on the current budget. So I'd say yes, this is in keeping with our current unit rate.
Second question, Mr. Mayor. Does council consider the cutting up and destroying 31 6-metre wide concrete or brick paved driveways, as well as hundreds of metres of plastic or steel reticulation pipe and sprinkler heads, is not just expensive but also environmentally reckless, with such mixed waste likely to go to landfill?
Look, that will come up, as I guess, as part of discussions this evening, and your comments on that will be taken on board, Mr. Massil.
Thank you. And lastly, do you believe that placing the footpath on the park side of Canaveral Crescent is more environmentally sustainable, with 26 less driveways and reticulated verges to be dug up and disposed of?
Thank you. And again, look, I think that's been answered by Mr. Gamoff, some of it, but council will take that on board this evening when they debate that item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, up the front as well.
Good evening, Pam Mistelis of Corbina. Just two short points to introduce my first question. We've lived in Canaveral Crescent for 48 years, and I spend a lot of time in the front garden. I often see school children coming home always on the south side. They never come on our side. So I think they've been told to, because there's far fewer driveways to cross. And secondly, I took to school this last week there's a child of Luke Slavomirsky, who's our grandson, in primary school, kindy he is, pre-primary, and honestly, my heart was in my mouth. He was on his scooter going along, because you can't keep up with them. A car was reversing down and he was heading straight for it, behind it. It was just a horrible thing to see, and luckily I was able to scream out and get him to stop. But it's really, really scary with all those crossings to see a small child going head on into it. But my question is, what methods of monitoring of foot traffic in Canaveral Crescent have been carried out before initiating this proposal, and when were they carried out?
Okay. Mr. Gamoff?
We don't do monitoring of pedestrian movements when we're taking into consideration which side of the road is more appropriate. There are a number of factors that we do take into consideration, but pedestrians will choose whichever side may be convenient at the time, but it's our experience that once a footpath is constructed, they're a lot more likely to use that footpath rather than the unmade surface.
I can't see these children changing, I'm sorry. And a second question. Are councillors aware that statistically in Australia, more children under the age of 5 are killed in driveways than on roads, and that placing the proposed footpath on Canaveral Crescent on the park side of the road reduces that risk?
No.
They're not aware?
No, I'm sure we're not aware of those statistics. We haven't been presented those statistics.
Well, that would be a valuable thing to find out. Well, lives are at risk, and it's not worth a few thousand or $100,000. Are councillors aware that a crossing point for the proposed footpath along Canaveral Crescent, as it intersects with Armadale Crescent, is not safe because the location is at the blind crest of a hill over which buses frequently pass? And do they have any ideas for mitigating that danger?
Mr. Gemov?
The city wouldn't necessarily agree that it's a blind corner, as you've labelled.
It's blind because you cannot see the traffic coming over the hill.
Please let Mr. Gemov answer.
It's not a blind corner, it's a blind hill.
Excuse me, please.
Yeah, we have been on site to verify sight lines for pedestrians. We consider there's sufficient sight lines from the where the crossing locations will be for pedestrians to make an educated decision on whether it's safe to cross the road.
Small children?
Well, small children should be guided by their parents, I guess.
Yes, but they tend to run ahead, and that's why they're in danger.
Thank you. And look, I think we all agree that footpaths are needed. They're an accessible network for everyone to be safer. Are there any other questions?
I'm in a safe place.
Are there? Yes? No, sorry, you've had your three. Yes? Thank you. Just your name and suburb.
Thank you. Yes, Julie Smith Massara from Coolbinia. Just a break for just one question from the very rigorous Canaveral Crescent footpath issue, which I will bring up in a moment. I noted that Councillor Ferrante requested that the ECU site be considered by the state government for the proposed film location that has been raised in the state government budget. Could you please update us on the response from the government and where we're at with this, please?
Yeah, I believe the letter has been sent. I can't recall the response. I don't think we've received a response yet, but it's important to note that whilst that letter did go out and the motion came up when they did announce that the 301 wasn't going ahead, they were very quick to announce another site. But we certainly indicated that the preference would be to have something in the City of Stirling.
Okay, thank you for that, much appreciated. For clarity, I am the resident of 52 Canaveral Crescent that my lovely neighbour Simon actually alluded to. So I do have a tree that is apparently causing quite the issue, and I have written to council today. But it's worth noting that I just want to make sure that that email was clearly understood. As many of the residents do, I definitely support community initiatives, and especially those with a health, definitely with a skew towards good health. However, the placement of the existing path is really the issue that's at point here, as my neighbours have alluded to, and I do very much stand with them. I would like to question, can you please outline the discussions that took place in regards to the users of the Canaveral Crescent footpath, that they will be forced to contend with 62 household bins every Thursday, blocking the footpath versus just 4 bins on the other side of the road, and in line with that, the discussions that took place in relation to the foot traffic and times. I understood from a previous question that you answered that you didn't undertake that study as to the times that the footpath would be actually used, which seems contrary to me that you wouldn't look at the times that the path is being used before the construction of the path takes place. The reason I'm asking the question to outline the discussions in relation to these two things is, as a resident of that street for the last 13 years, I'm very fortunate that I have a bird's eye view of the traffic, the foot traffic that actually comes through. I've worked from home for the last 13 years, and I can tell you now that the vast majority of that traffic is on the opposite side to where the footpath is currently being proposed, mostly because the vast majority of people use that side of the road because it's where the bus drops them off. The other side of the road, they're heading into the city in the mornings. That side of the road, the opposite side to where the footpath is where they're being dropped off at night. They're not heading into the city and catching public transport at 7, 8 p.m, even 6 p.m. when it gets dark. So I think it's imperative. But please outline the discussions that took place in relation to those things.
Thank you. Mr. Gemov.
Okay. In relation to the first part of your issue regarding bins, we understand that people do place their bins on footpaths. We have hundreds of roads that have footpaths against the curb. And I guess this probably adds weight to the need for a wider footpath, because we do understand that people do put their bins on the footpaths. And at least if there is a bin on a footpath, it does give someone the opportunity to bypass that bin. So I guess I'm not sure if that's sort of responded to that part of your query.
Yes, but you're still dealing with 62 versus 4, so I understand, but it feels
Yes,
like that's...
there's
yeah.
definitely more bins, obviously, on the northern side, but taking into account all of the factors that are in the report, we considered the northern side as provide the optimal solution. And in terms of, I guess, the pedestrian surveys, I guess the overarching factor is that we believe that there were constraints on the southern side that would make the construction of a path either very difficult to achieve or very expensive to achieve. Not only in terms of the retaining that I've explained previously, but also even though there isn't a lot of crossovers on the southern side, there are obviously some crossovers on that side, and they do fall away quite sharply. So if we were to introduce a footpath that had a crossfall for water to drain into the road, we'd then have to lift those crossovers even higher, and at the back of the path, trying to transition back into people's garages would be very difficult to achieve, and it would most likely end up with low clearance for vehicles that end up scraping underneath vehicles. So taking all of those constraints into consideration and the other factors that are mentioned in the report, we would maintain that we believe the northern side is the more appropriate side for a footpath.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you, but you are talking about 2 houses versus a number of houses.
Sorry, I just need you to address your question through me if you can.
Thank you. I would also like an explanation that the existing footpath serving Canaveral Crescent is already on the outer ring side of the road, and that the location users are being asked to cross Canaveral Crescent to continue their walk, which is not safe because it is on a blind bend at the merge point of Canaveral Crescent and Armidale Crescent, intersecting with Elmer Street. Similarly, you are also asking people that use the public transport to cross that section of the road in the evening when the majority of the traffic actually comes through.
Thank you for that question, and that already has been answered, and that is acknowledged, but it's also acknowledged that on the other side of the road there would be several road crossings.
Is that... Thank you.
Thank you. Are there anyone else I've missed? If not, thank you very much. I will now move on to item 8, which is application for leave of absence. Are there any requests, councillors, for leave of absence? No indication. I'll go on to item 9, which is confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 22nd of March 2022? Move Councillor Kristovich, seconder Councillor Migdale. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Farrelly, can I just see your hand? Thank you. Yes. Announcements by the presiding member. I have nil. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Now on to item 12, reports and recommendations on committee, and we'll move on to the Community and Resource Committee items. Councillors, do you wish to pull any of those items out? Councillor Ree?
Yes, thank you. 12.1 CC1 on page 11, please.
Thank you. Are there any other items to be pulled out? If not, I will go straight to that one. So I'll go to item 12.1 CC1, Community Arts and Events Fund Policy Review. Councillor Sargent, as Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll get some advice from you before I move a motion. I have an alternative recommendation here that's similar but a little bit out of what the committee recommended. With your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, am I able to move that?
Yes, you are.
Then, with that advice, I will move the recommendation that is on the white paper.
Thank you. And that is seconded by Councillor Ree. Sure, let's do your question. Let's just see if it can be sorted out easily.
My question, which I did ask governance, does that mean that when it gets referred, when it gets referred to the through council's quarterly audit process, does that mean it actually goes to the audit committee to be tabled?
Yes, that's what.
Then the only other addition would be that in 1E, that it also gets report back through the council's quarterly audited process, because that makes it consistent with all the other sections. That's the only addition I would say there.
Sure, and I think, so that's with E, with the in-kinds, yes. So that can be, I think the intent is that would happen, yes. And are you happy with that, Councillor Sargent? Yep. Is there anyone opposed to this then? If no one is opposed, then I will put that item. All those in favour, please. Just noting that Councillor Migdale has left the chamber. That is unanimous. Thank you. That brings us to the balance of reports. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me great joy to move the balance of reports.
Great joy. It's good to see. And Deputy Mayor has seconded that. So I will put the balance of reports. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Again, noting Councillor Migdale is out of the chamber. Members of the gallery, please be advised the remainder of the Community and Resource Committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution. That now brings us to item 13, reports for consideration in accordance with 4.24 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law. And the first one of those, item 13.1, the Council submission on Main Roads WA concept design for West Coast Highway Scarborough on page 97. Do I have a mover of the motion? Councillor Farrelly, you're moving that motion? Yes?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Kristovich. Is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that item. All those in favour, please. Sorry, I just need to check. Just put your hands down for a sec. That's right. That's all right. So I will put that now to the vote. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. I will now go on to item 13.2, which is Local Planning Scheme number 3, noting that Councillor Farrelly's Zoom will be turned off during this item as she has declared a financial interest. I'll just wait for confirmation. That's okay. So we're now dealing with item 13.2, Local Planning Scheme number 3, Amendment number 124, Scarborough Redevelopment Area, transfer of planning control of the Scarborough Redevelopment Area into Local Planning Scheme number 3, the initiation. On page 112, do I have a mover of motion? Councillor Kristovich. Happy to move that. Councillor Ree, seconded. Thank you. Councillor Sandri is opposed. Councillor Kristovich.
I only have questions.
Is it just some questions? Yeah. Sure. I think we're happy with that. Yep.
Thank you. In terms of the questions, just with the attachment, which is the current Scarborough redevelopment scheme, there's sections that are blocked out and there's sections that aren't blocked out. And I'm assuming, I've just had clarification from the manager, those that aren't blocked out is what's intended to go into our scheme. Was there any consideration in reducing the number of words to put in the scheme? Normally a scheme is a very concise document with legal grounds. I feel like, you know, placing the complete vision and the complete objectives and the sense of place in that is going to get lost.
Mr. Roddy.
Of the area.
Councillor Sandri, sorry, we did reduce the amount of words for the scheme. Are you saying that you would like more in there?
No, sorry, through the chair. Through the mayor, what I'm saying is that we're actually putting in things like sense of place, there's like 10 bullet points, economic wellbeing, urban efficiency, connectivity, social integration, environmental integrity, which is way above and beyond what we would do in our current areas in the scheme, and whether it's appropriate in the scheme or whether it's more appropriate in a policy.
Thank you. Mr. Roddick.
Through our discussions with the department officers, taking it through that simple normalisation process, they wanted us to take the framework as much as it was now into the scheme. So without any changes, we took some parts out of it, but they didn't want us to tinker with it too much. Of course, when we go through, I guess, Local Planning Scheme 4, the drafting of that, we may revisit that. But for the purpose of getting normalisation underway, we were trying to take, I guess, their scheme and their policies going in our, I guess, our special control area in the development zone as it was.
Thank you. And just one other very quick question. Was there ever a consideration to make this a scheme in itself as opposed to an addition to our current scheme, just because it is very different to how we structure our current scheme and probably, to be fair, not aligned with the regulations?
Mr. Rodich?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there were discussions with the department, but in order to progress normalisation, we landed on going through this process rather than having a separate scheme for the area. Consolidating into our scheme was perceived by the Department of Planning and our officers as, I guess, the most straightforward approach to bring that framework under our control. As I've stated before previously, once that is under our control through our scheme, then we can revisit that planning framework and maybe simplify it in the future.
That's all, but I might just mention, I think we're getting the short end of the stick here, but anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. There is no one opposed for debate on this item, so I will put it. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. If we can pause and let Councillor Farrelly back into the virtual chamber. There she is. Just a thumbs up, Councillor. Have you got us? Yep, good. All right, that now brings us to item 13.3. I do have declaration from Councillor Lagan and Councillor Sandry on this item. In partial interest, as they met residents on the 3rd of April to view the footpath issue and discuss with them. Item 13.3, Electors' General Meeting, consideration of motions. Look, it is important probably just to provide some clarification to any viewers at home as well. The bulk of the Electors' General Meeting motions, a motion was put by this council a few years ago to ensure that rather than them not being considered by council and just being noted, that they were given due consideration. And because of that, it does take a little bit of time to get them together, remembering the motions were all put last week. So they will come to the 10th of May. There's a couple of motions that have been brought forward, and it's because we recognise that with the Canaveral Crescent issue, for example, there's significant angst amongst the residents, but also that we had contractors who were due to start work this week. So it thought more appropriate rather than to hold off for a month to deal with it now. And the other one is the childcare, and the reason that was brought on that night, Councillor Ree put up a motion. So again, it seemed a bit silly to deal with a notice of motion tonight on a very same issue, and that's why we notified those residents that we'd bring those Electors' General Meeting items forward, because they're effectively dealing with the same item. So that's why those two items have been brought forward. I hope that's clarified it and not made it more complicated. So I will now ask if anyone has a motion for the floor. Councillor Ree.
Yes, I'd like to support the officer's recommendation on page 1. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I'd like to support the officer's recommendation on page 142, however, with the comment that council notes some of the motions, because, which I hope, Mr Mayor, you will have that preamble you just said in the minutes, but I think it should be quite clear that these were not all the motions. So it does say, yes, note the motions, it should be some of the motions, please. If we could just change that, because that would be correct. Yes, so if I could move that way, please.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for this? Councillor Proud. Is there anyone opposed? There's no one opposed to these? No? In that case, I will put these items. Sorry, I can sort of see half hands, that's all. Just everyone put their hands down for a sec. Councillors, is there anyone opposed? I'm not caucusing. I can see hands with someone not sure, and Councillor, I've asked twice, so if there's no one opposed, then I will put this item.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I indicated opposed. I have an alternative recommendation.
That's 3 times, Councillor.
Well, I did extend my hand when you asked for a mover of a motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, so you're opposed to this motion? Councillor, if you don't even know if you're opposed...
I am
seriously,
opposed,
councillors.
Mr Mayor.
There's a motion on the table. If someone is opposed, please let me know. You're opposed, Councillor Migdale. Thank you.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ree. It's fine. If someone's opposed, let's debate it.
Are we only talking about the daycare here?
No, we're talking about the
About
motion.
both of them.
This whole motion is up on the table. Councillor Ree, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I think, could I get clarification under our standing orders of how many times you can ask people whether or not they're for and against?
How about you get on with debating this motion,
Come
Councillor?
on. I'd just like to say that one, as I said at the beginning, and I thought I made myself quite clear while everybody was here, and I thank you, Mr Mayor, for your comments, which I think everybody heard, most people heard, and the alteration that's there. It is important to note that all the motions weren't there. With the other comments from, on page 143, from Ms D. Allen, that the other comments regarding the footpath installation, footpath review policy, etc., will be raised at the next council meeting because that's not addressed here. Am I not correct in that? That's right. These are the only parts of the electors' meeting that will be discussed. Correct? Yes. So the other parts of the motion will be discussed in a month. Correct?
No, so let's be very clear that the motion relating to D. Allen and T. Poggioli, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, I know I'm not good at that, will be dealt with tonight. They will not come back for another go on the 10th of May.
I think for clarification, if you look at D. Allen's and you look at Poggioli's motions, they have several parts to it.
And if you read the report, it clearly says some of them are not supported. This is an officer recommendation. The officer had substantial attachments to these, and the actual motion itself had the other motions listed, and it had whether they were supported or not by officers. So these have been dealt with in this report, all of those motions.
Oh, we can refer back to that then. I was under the impression that it was only when you look at it, even when reading it, that they were only taking parts of the motions. That's the way it was read, and that's the way I interpreted it. And even though the policy said the report said we're only talking about this and other, this is the piecemeal that we shouldn't be having. All these motions should have been brought forward, and the officers should have been saying, I can't deal with this 1A, 1-2, 1-3, whatever. I mean, we've got 1,000 staff. I fail to understand why a lot of them weren't dealt with.
Just for clarification, let's be very clear. If you read that report, it clearly says it is dealing with the whole of those ratepayers' motions, and it clearly says whether they're supported or not by the officers. And then it has a very, very detailed attachment on each of these. Significant time would have been taken to write the reports on these. And so I don't believe it's piecemeal at all.
Well, the fact that this is not a new topic, I disagree, if I may, but I do believe the way this is interpreted, you would come to that conclusion. However, with regard to some of these issues, when it's raised later, we can address it, which I'm sure it can be done. I do believe that with the cost analysis, I'll just take the first one, 1A, and also I don't believe that we can go 1A and 1B because you cannot approve 1A without 1B, which is ridiculous because that also goes against the regulations when we look at the motions. There actually should be one,
Sorry, Councillor, you spent your whole time debating the process rather than talking about the actual item in front of us. If you support this item, I suggest you talk to the item and support it.
Well, I am, but what I'm saying is that you cannot go 1A without B. So we have to talk about a footpath and a childcare.
We can do whatever we like, Councillor. I'm quite happy that you can vote for one and not the other if you want. We can sort that out.
Do 1A and 1B.
Councillor, you obviously support them both, so I don't know why you're arguing with yourself. Please debate this item.
Point of clarification, I'm withdrawing my seconding. I think we should debate the items separately. They're totally separate and it should be 1, 2, 3, not 1AB.
And that's my clarification, which I was under the opinion you can only put 1A, B, C if it relates to the one item. Therefore,
take a seat, please, Councillor. So you've withdrawn your seconding. Let me get the Manager of Governance to clarify how he would like us to progress on this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council can deal with these motions in any way it wants. The standing orders provide that in relation to complex motions that they may be split up and voted on as required.
So we can spend time now separating these and calling them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want, or we can talk about the actual item. I think it's very clear. If you'd like to talk to 1A and against 1B, whatever, you can.
Well, the thing is, can we, which I didn't believe we could, vote for 1A or 1B?
Yes, I'm quite happy, but
Okay, if you're happy as a presiding member to allow us to do that, then I'm happy to continue, which I didn't believe you could.
So I'm happy to second 1B as the alternative.
all right, this is going to get really messy. Let's separate it then. So let's go let's call them all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Just hold on a minute while we do that.
While we're dealing with this, councillors, can you all please be very clear what you're voting for, what you're seconding, what you're moving. If you don't want to move this motion, move an alternative motion. I don't mind what you move, but it becomes a motion. There's no motion on the table. You don't get to continue. Just sit down, please. Let's get the numbers up here. All right, councillor, you happy with that?
He still needs a bit of a time.
I will come to you in a sec, councillor.
I actually thought that the council notes some of the motions actually is the overarching, because this still implies that only some of the motions
Sure.
from DL and some of the motions from...
I've got to say my frustration in the fact councillors have had a long time to wordsmith this. This is about debating an item tonight. So can we'd like to separate that top bit. So the council notes some of the motion adopted at the special electors meeting. And then that council takes no further action to implement the following motion. Then note some of the motions on the next one.
The intent is clear.
Is there someone who'd like to move this motion as it stands? Moved. Is there someone who'd like to second this motion? No? Councillor Proud, you'd like to...
Councillor Reid talking about number 3 because she started...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I've had my hand up indicating for the last 40 minutes.
Point of order, councillor. You were slow to the party when Councillor Reid moved this motion.
Councillor Reid's seconder withdrew her seconding of the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Reid never removed her moving of the motion, councillor. I'm happy with this. Are you happy to second this one, Councillor Proud? Which...
Councillor Reid started off speaking about 1B.
Let's not worry about any of that. She has moved a
Well-
motion. I'm asking for someone to second this.
So that's what I'm talking about, I understand. So is that what Councillor Reid is still talking about, is number 3? So I'm happy to second number 3. We can get to number 2.
Sorry. No, this is a motion. Councillor Reid has moved this whole motion. Is there someone who'd like to second it? That motion lapses.
No.
Councillor Migdale, your motion. It's not ridiculous. There
Thank
was
you,
no one to
Mr
second
Mayor.
it.
I would like to ask that these items be put separately, please.
I'm happy to.
Thank you. So I have an alternative recommendation
Well, let's hear
that
that
I'd
before
like
you
put
get
up on the
put
board,
separately.
please. Governance can put it up. You can't hear me? No? Okay. No, I haven't got it in front of me, so I have to rely on my long vision. That council notes, can you please increase the size of it for those at the back?
So number 2 is the only one that's changed.
Yes, that council, yes. That council completes a review of the new footpath policy, A, and B, installs the path along Canaveral Crescent as proposed, subject to the following amendments. And they are, I don't know if it's A or B, whatever it is.
That's all right.
1, the
Let's not worry
path
about
being a maximum width of 1.2 metres. And B, remove and replace with a suitable species the box tree adjacent to 52 Canaveral Crescent, Corbinia, to enable the path alignment to be maintained for its length.
Thank
I
you.
so move.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? This is all motions. Is there Councillor Ferranti? Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree? Councillor Migdale?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we are moving these on block with the alternate recommendation?
No,
Is that correct?
No, I'm happy. We've got a motion on the table with all 5. I'm happy to put them all separately. There's no problem with that.
So they are all separated. So we are at the moment discussing item 2.
No, you're discussing the whole motion. Councillor Ree is opposed to this.
Yes.
You can tell us which part you're talking to.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am talking to item number 2 and number 2 alone this evening and the alt rec that I have put up. Firstly, as ward councillor, I would like to thank all of the residents on Canaveral Crescent for sharing their opinion passionately on this item. I also wish to extend my personal thanks to both Deirdre and Arthur for their dedication in communicating with their neighbours in this instance. I also would like to thank residents not only on Canaveral Crescent, but those also on Elstree and Corder, who have shared with me over the past month or so their opinions with regards to footpaths. The main points around the Canaveral Crescent footpath that everyone seems to agree upon are: footpaths are important and should be provided. It is the council's role to provide a footpath network. We should limit concrete and ensure as much green space as is maintained as possible. And all residents deserve the right to have access to a footpath for safety and accessibility. The concerns of some residents have been that it shouldn't be on their side of the road because of the driveways. Per the report from officers, there are several reasons why our city officers have recommended that the path be installed on the north side of the road as opposed to the south side. Best practice is to place the footpaths under existing lighting to enable evening use, and due to the less steep gradient on the north side of the street, whilst the southern side would require extensive retaining as well as rails be implemented for the safety of residents. It was also mentioned this evening with regards to bus stops and the fact that the other side of the street should be considered because people are alighting the bus on that side. But I guess we all need to consider that there is literally a bus stop on both sides of this street. So if people are getting off the bus on one side, they may be getting on or off the bus on the other side as well. So I guess we must just take that as is. Cost has never been an issue with this program. And while council has never directed officers to take the cheapest option or try to save money on these projects, the north side, incidentally, is the less expensive option. This isn't just about a footpath policy either. It does align to many other policies and strategies around age-friendly, accessibility, livable neighbourhoods, etc. And just on that, Canaveral Crescent is one of the most beautiful crescents in Corbinia. It's splendid and magnificent, and one that you should certainly, if you haven't already, take the time to walk down. Now, sadly, some time ago, a pedestrian was knocked down and killed on Canaveral Crescent, and that is one of the reasons why it has been ranked on our schedule of footpath implementations. As far as our footpath policy is concerned, we, as directed by residents with their feedback through Have Your Say, when we last reviewed the footpath policy, look to include safe, accessible footpaths throughout the entire city of Stirling. And that does not exclude any particular street, residential street within the city. That is all inclusive, accessibility for all residents, whether they live on a street, adjacent to that street, in that suburb or within the city. I dare say that those of you who don't live in Scarborough and go down to Scarborough whenever you do, walk on a path, occasionally on the sand as well, but you expect that the city maintains and gives you the opportunity of being able to walk on a path. And whilst I do believe, it is my belief that on Carnarvon Crescent, I would not like to see a concrete jungle created. And I do accept that in certain circumstances, there are some residents who do not have a huge amount of space between the verge and their front gate where a visitor could potentially park. I accept that, but I also know that children deserve to have a path to walk down off of a gravel road. Children that play on phones and look at their phones whilst walking in a suburb that is convoluted with peaks and twists deserve for us through our policy, as we have been directed through public consultation, should implement a path whereby these children are safe. Sorry, I was just looking at Councillor Sargent with his phone. Wasn't sure what was going on there. Hope it wasn't a photo. Oh, you're seeing, okay, fair enough, fair enough. So, look, consultation has been brought up a lot. Let's not confuse consultation with us pretending to ask residents if they want something or not. Footpaths are not something, if you feel like one, we'll build it. As a city, we've committed to provide access to safe footpaths on every street within our city. I accept and admire Coolbinia as being the garden suburb that it is. It is magnificent, it's beautiful, and yet I drive around the suburb every day, and every day I do see children on scooters, on gravel, on the road, and I have seen children take a spill on the road, on the gravel, but there is no alternative in most of the streets. This is a majestic crescent. There should be a footpath, and no residents deny that. Unfortunately,
wrap it up, thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, the south side of the street would require a substantial limestone retaining. It would require guardrails, and also midway between on Carnarvon Crescent, there is a bend with a substantial tree and infrastructure, which really would make it untenable to put a footpath on that section. Last thing I want to mention to you is that you have 300 metres to one primary school from one end of the street, 300 metres to another primary school from the other end of the street. We need to provide safe access. As councillors, it is our role to implement this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Ferrante.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, and obviously Councillor McDale's touched on a lot of different points that council will consider tonight as a council in its entirety, and we sometimes get the footpaths brought to council so all councillors can make an informed decision. A lot of councillors have been and visited the sites and Carnarvon Crescent to check on what they believe is the best step forward. We've had the engineers advise us that this is the better side, the northern side, to put the footpath on. One of the things that really tweaks me a little bit is one day when we were doing some public consultation in the park with the ratepayers, that I saw a mum with a pram walking on the road, and I thought, wow, okay, we really need to get a decision on this. And I guess each councillor is going to make their own informed decisions, because we need to make some sort of decision, because this road is a dangerous road at particular points, and obviously there's been a death over a time. My point is, I just wanted to share my experience of a footpath in front of my house, and I have a 1.2 metre footpath. Look, we've changed the policy a little bit. We've moved the footpath away from the mailboxes now down onto the verge, which gives people better line of sight to reverse out. I have my driveway with 4 cars that backs onto the footpath, and when we reverse out, we check, because there's a lot of kids now using it. It feeds to the university, to the Mount Lawley High School, and it's pleasing to see that they're safely on the road. And off the road rather, and not on the road. Now you see the occasional scooter on the road and bikes, of course, but I see a lot of residents, because I work from home, using the footpaths. So we really need to provide some sort of safety. Now, 32, the discussions around 32 driveways would be, inconvenienced. You get used to it because the drivers on that side, their families will find it more convenient to actually utilise the footpath, and there's more people on that side that will use the footpath. And it's all about, I guess, the community. And I know some people won't be happy with that, but this is why we're here to make a decision and discuss this, because it needs some discussion, but we also need a decision. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you very much. I'd like to foreshadow an alternative to 2, please. I don't know whether or not I can actually say that now. Or
Sure, just let us know. Yep.
the staff have it. I can put it up, please.
Just a simple summary of, I guess it is that action is taken. Is that right?
That the city number, no, that becomes a different, my 4, which becomes a different number 2.
Right,
Which is that the cities of Stirling not proceed with the proposed footpath on the Canaveral Crescent side until the following is undertaken: consultation with the wider neighbourhood, including all households and neighbourhood side streets, and which side of Canaveral Crescent the footpath shall be located, and advice given accordingly, and the suburbs designed under the Ebenezer Howard Garden Suburbs Movement, limiting impact on vehicle crossovers, a comparison of cost of each side of the road, sustainability, environmental impacts, and the greatest accessibility for the wider neighbourhood.
Thanks. So is that a foreshadowed
For
3?
a change for 2.
No, well,
That becomes
2 in front of me is
yes.
relating to childcare premises.
Ah.
So I'm pretty
No,
sure this,
sorry, that got
this is
changed.
foreshadowing 3.
Yes, because
Yes.
my apologies, yes, because
No.
I'm going off this sheet.
Sure.
So
Yep. So noted.
Yeah, so that's my alternative.
Yep.
So coming back to the substantive, and my apologies because we're jumping all over the place, if we could lower that down again.
Yep.
Just so that I can make sure I'm right numbers.
Which number would you like to talk to at the moment?
Number 1, I think is really important for our residents, as I alluded to before confusion sets in, so I don't think I need to say anything more than that.
Yep.
Number 2, I do, even though it's written in the minutes, I do believe that we actually should take further action, because I do believe that the issues regarding childcare approval, especially when the Minister has said processes and procedures are so important, I actually would like to foreshadow that we do. So council take out the no. That's easier,
Yep, so we don't even need to write that at the moment. Let's just leave that, noting that you foreshadowed it.
Take that out as just a no. That
Yep.
might make it a bit easier.
So I'm just saying you foreshadowed 2 and 3. Let's
Yeah,
get, just
and then-
just take a seat for a sec, Council. I'll just get Mr Rodich to provide some advice on that one. Just on writing to the Minister.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's not, I guess, standard practice for the city to write to the Minister, I guess, objecting to another decision made by a decision maker in regards to, I guess, this specific application. The JDAP was the decision maker, the city officers wrote a report and a decision was made.
That's right. Okay, Councillor Ree,
I
continue.
think my point is, and yes, I totally agree, it may not be our past, although I do believe we did make a comment regarding yellow and a couple of other issues over the years. We've actually written letters. So, or Mr Mayor, you've written a letter, I think you did in that particular case. But anyway, my point is, I think the whole childcare system in the whole of WA is becoming a basket case. It really is, as far as residents are concerned. And we need for the Minister to realise we're the biggest council. We've got childcare centres popping up all over the place. Some of them don't come to council. Some of them aren't approved by council. Some of them are approved by JDAP. I think we're not fair to the residents, and we can't control a lot of it. And I think the Minister needs to know that for the residents to realise that some of it has got nothing to do with us. We can't control it. But
So just so we're clear, for clarification, this item isn't about that. Item 4 is about reviewing. This one is purely about writing on one approval at Hale Road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just,
But my point is still about the whole review childcare policy thing. So my
Slide four.
comment with that is just taking out the no,
Yep.
because I think that's important. And that, I think it's just an easier way to do it. So that means they write to and all the other things. The second one, to make sure I'm chronological, so that's the second one. The third one, I've written alternative motion below. So I've foreshadowed that it does get, it be looked at. One of the things that was raised, and my apologies for being ageist, one of the things that was raised about 17 years ago was the fact when they were trying to put the footpath policy in, a lot of people didn't want a footpath in front of their house, but they did want access to the park. So I said, well, why can't we just put a footpath around the park? And when we put footpaths around the park, which we've now done in most of our suburbs, it has been so much more beneficial than putting it in front of people's driveways, which has interfered with parking, cars, trucks, you name it. It's driving people nuts, and it's just not just in one suburb, it's all over the place. But when we actually put them in the parks, people actually took their prams, took their scooters, took their kids, and they made sure their kids looked without their mobile phone when they crossed the road, to make sure that they weren't hurt. And that has actually been a great practice, and people have enjoyed that. The connectivity is there because what we want to do is get people in the parks. You know, with regard to this particular situation, you know, I still have not seen the financial details to stack up one against the other. I cannot see cutting up 35 driveways against cutting up 3. It is mathematically where are we going with that one. I actually think...
30 seconds. That's all right.
May I have an extension, please?
Yes,
because
you may.
I had to have clarification on all those little issues.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, you're so kind. I really think with regard to the actual issue itself, it is a bad corner. We know it's a bad corner. Between that and Clifton Crescent, I think anybody that ever follows City of Stirling knows they're irregular. So, you know, it is issues that hasn't been abated. You've got a bus stop on one side. You've got a park that, I must add, that has got no water in it. We could be doing a little bit more with those pocket parks around there, a bit more water. But, you know, we could actually have an activity corridor there on the south side. And the footpath can go around, people will enjoy it, get them swings. We can change people's culture. You know, build it and they will come. That's an old adage. They don't have to walk on one side. We don't have to interfere with all the neighbours and everything else. We've got a lot of mature people there that'll be so scared about driving out their driveways in case they ran into a kid. And yes, all the best parenting in the world isn't going to stop a child when it's excited. I'm going to a park, I'm going to walk, especially in our little COVID prison system we're in now. So I think all of those things are so important. They're not taken into consideration. We have so many people that have taken the time between COVID, houses, dark, everything, to come to a AGM, an electors meeting, to come to a council meeting over the last month and say, hey, what about me? Why didn't you write to me? Why didn't you consider what I thought? Why did you just say the contractors are doing it? And whether it's a street tree, whether it's a footpath, we've got to review it. I totally agree that we've got to review the policy, the footpath policy, which we've been talking about. We did it before. People want parks. They want to be engaging with the community. They don't want to be told, only walk left, right, don't walk on the other side. I think we need to come back to our roots of what we're doing, and that's grassroots, which is local government. So to me, I think we need the alternative. We need to support the people. And if you're really worried about a contractor in the whole of the city who's got no other footpath to build, I'll give you a couple where people will sit there and say, build it tomorrow. I've got a couple of good ones in Inaloo if you'd like it. So I don't think we'll go astray with concrete because we love concrete in the City of Stirling. So, you know, I don't think that's the problem at all. So, you know, saying that you've got the workmen is wrong. And if we've got jobs that they can't be deviated for 1 week, there's a serious issue. So, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Noting that I've received a declaration on this item, impartial, from councillor Migdale as an extended family member lives on Carnarvon. I'll now go to item 4. Councillor, not item 4, number 4 on my list. Councillor Lagan, you've indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I had a question about the tree in that item, which I believe is the alt rec that Councillor Reeves put up.
No,
So
I think it's
number
in
3, B2. I just have a question on that.
Is it in the? It's in the actual alt rec that councillor Migdale
It's in
put
the
up, I believe.
recommendation, okay. So
Yep.
just a question on number 3, B2,
Yep.
the removal of the tree. Is the cost of the removal of the tree and replacement included within the budget figure? And if not, can officers give us an indicative cost for that?
Mr. Guimont, are you able to do that, or Mr. Littleton? Mr. Littleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Lagan. Look, I don't believe that the cost of the removal of the tree was contemplated in the budget that was proposed in the 207,000. Obviously, there would be an additional cost of the path works, but the cost of removal of the box tree would be certainly less than $2,000. So I don't think it would be a particularly big impost on the budget.
Councillor?
Thank you. Just further to that, so through you, Mr Mayor, has there been any occasions where the city has either built a road or path around a tree in any suburbs in the city?
Yes.
That was a trick question.
It was a simple answer. Councillor Lagan, have you got any other? No, you're happy. Councillor Proud?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, I'd like to ask for the mover and seconder if they would be open to, I'm talking to number 3, B1, open to amending that from 1.2 to 1.5 in lieu of 1.8.
Okay, so we're just checking on an amendment to... So the original officer's recommendation had 1.8, the alt rec is 1.2. Councillor Proud's going for a negotiation. Councillor McDowell, would you like to accept that? No, the mover doesn't accept it. Councillor Proud?
So perhaps I could move an amendment
Sure.
for that, and I'd like to ask a question through you first.
Yep.
And this is through probably Mr. Guillemot.
Well, let's hear the question and we'll work it out.
Okay.
Yep.
I know I didn't get out there over the weekend to view, but I had a good research on aerials, etc. I can see most of the driveways are double driveways, just not totally accurate on the length of the driveway. Can a vehicle park in front of their garage and not be overhanging? So an officer could perhaps respond to that, and then I can
we'll
carry
go to
on.
Mr. Guillemot, do you understand the question? So is there enough room with a path either at 1.5 or 1.2 for a car to park and not be obstructing? That's what you're saying, or in front of the garage?
Yeah, through the chair, from my observations and being on site, I don't claim to be an expert on have all the dimensions of all the driveways, but there were quite a few properties that had front gates that obviously prevented you from parking further into the driveway. But from my observations to the properties that I visited, there appeared to be enough room for a normal sized vehicle to be parked up with its nose relatively close to a gate and still have sufficient room behind it for a path.
Thank you. So, councillor, you'd like to move the amendment of 1.5 in lieu of the 1.2 that's been proposed. Is there a seconder for that amendment? There being no seconder, that amendment lapses. So we'll go back to the substantive motion on the table. Councillor Proud.
Thank you. I only have concerns. 1.5 is 1.8 is the preferred minimum. 1.5 is the next preferred through livable neighbourhoods and Austroads Guide. That's why I'm suggesting that.
There's no point in debating it now, though.
No, it's been the 1.2. I do have a bit of a concern, like bin night. Okay, that's only one night out of 7. There'll be 2 bins, and I'm just not sure 1.8 can amply accommodate 2 bins. The bigger bin, that's at the width we're talking about, and still allow traverse behind it. However, 1.2, I think it cuts it pretty fine, especially when you've got parents pushing prams or in mobile devices, gophers, etc. So I did have concerns on that, and I don't know that you can't vote against any one of those items because they're ABC. So anyway, that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Just double checking with Councillor Farrelly. Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Michael Littleton, if we can, what is the width of a bin?
Mr. Littleton, how big is a bin? Mr. Guillemov's dying to do this one. He knows this. Let's see, Mr. Guillemov. You're happy with 780?
Yes, I am. So that leaves...
Going once, going
Well
twice.
done to Councillor Sundry. You happy with that, Councillor Sargent?
I am. So it would take up
780
just
deep.
over half the footpath with 1.2.
No, the green ones.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. Okay. I think we get the point. Councillors, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this item? If not, I will go back to Councillor Migdale to close on this item.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Over the last, I won't say 2 months, because this item was scheduled to be implemented in November and it was held off. Over the last 12 to 14 months, I've had no less than 5 site visits with engineers and closer to 10 site visits with residents, discussing all different aspects from end to end, from essentially Walcott Street to Bradford Street, and gone over every possibility of implementing a footpath. Now remember that Canaveral Crescent backs onto Armidale Crescent. Armidale Crescent has had a footpath from Bradford Street all the way around to where it could potentially meet up with Carnarvon. It just doesn't have Carnarvon. So you've got half of a loop, half of a potential full path linking to a main distributor road on Walcott Street through to Bradford Street. And just across Walcott Street, 100 metres away, is Kyilla Primary, and just across Bradford Street, or down the hill slightly 100 to 150 metres, is Corbinia Primary. So this makes logical sense. I have had so much feedback, which I have been able to share with you, many emails from residents who are happy and excited, and some who have said it's about time that this footpath should be implemented. And I feel very comfortable and confident that we are fulfilling our duty as councillors by implementing, as part of our footpath policy, a safe way of residents of the entire city and the entire suburb of Corbinia and Menora, assisting them with safe passage in traversing their local neighbourhood. 2 years ago, the footpath policy was reviewed in 2020. It's not as if this particular policy, which we are operating under or using as our guide, is entirely outdated or from the year 2000. This is 2020. It was reviewed. The last point that I would like to make is I would like to remind all residents that when the City of Stirling reviews a policy, any policy, and says, have your say, we are genuinely asking for people to have their say, for our residents at that time to share with us what they would like to see implemented in the policy, because those policies guide us. They guide our administration staff and they guide councillors with making the highest and best decisions considering our residents. And in this instance, I feel very comfortable that this alt-rec does exactly that. And I ask you to support it. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Councillor. So we will now put these items... Thank you. Playing to the live stream, I'm sure. There are 5 items. So we'll put these all separately, councillors, noting that when we get to item 2, I'll remind you when we get to these items, there is a foreshadowed motion as well. So the first one should be an easy one. Let's practice on this one. So this is council notes some of the motions adopted at the electors' general meeting. If I can have a show of hands, all those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Good. Off to a good start. All right, the next one is that council takes no further action to implement. So this means that council does not write to the Minister for Planning. Noting there is a foreshadowed one by Councillor Reid to write. So all those in favour of this motion, please raise your hand. And so for, we have Councillor Hatton, Councillor Perkoff, Councillor Lagan, Councillor Sandri, Councillor Ferrante, Councillor Migdale, Councillor Criado, sorry, Councillor Sargent and myself. And against we have Councillor Ree, Councillor Olo, Councillor Kristovich, Councillor Proud and Councillor Farrelly. That motion is carried. We now go to item 3. So let's have a read of that. So this is that Council does complete a review of its footpath policy. Council installs a path along Canaveral Crescent at 1.2 metres and takes into account that tree and that diversion to fix that. Noting there is a foreshadowed one to hold this by Councillor Ree. So I will now put that motion. All those in favour, please. And we have Councillor Lagan, Councillor Sandri, Councillor Ferrante, Councillor Migdale, Councillor Sargent, Councillor Kristovich, Councillor Proud and myself. And against we have Councillor Ree, Councillor Hatton, Councillor Perkoff, Councillor Olo, Councillor Criado and Councillor Farrelly. That motion, should have been counting as I did it, is carried. Thank you. We'll now go to item 4, that a report be presented to Council prior to the end of 2022 on the findings of an officer review and the issues relating to the motion carried, which was changes to the City Childcare Centre's planning policy. All those in favour, please. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And item 5, that council notes a notice of motion proposed by Councillor Elizabeth Ree in relation to the review of the city's childcare policy is dealt with by motion 4. All those in favour. That motion is unanimous and is also carried. Thank you, councillors. Thanks for getting through that. A little bit confusing at times, but we got there. I will now go to item 14, which is notice of motion for consideration. I've Neil. Oh, sorry, I should ask you. Is there any notice of motions for consideration? Councillor Proud, and I've got you, Councillor Farrelly, afterwards. Yep. Your motion.
Thank you. That a report be presented to Council on a proposal to provide natural shade to the Administration Centre front forecourt and review associated landscaping for consideration in the 22-23 budget deliberations.
Thank you.
Do you want me to read out the reason?
No, that's all right. That's clear. And Councillor Farrelly, I've got you if you'd like to speak.
Yes, if you could just put it up, that would be great, so I can then just read it.
There it is. Have you got that?
Soon, I hope. No.
So I've got it on my main screen, but not on the Zoom screen, if that...
Oh, okay. I can't see the main screen. Sorry about that. Can you read it out, Mr. Mayor? Because
Yeah, sure. Let me read. So this is a motion from Councillor Farrelly that the e-scooter Neuron trial implement a curfew on e-scooter use from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. as a matter of priority. The use of the e-scooters after 10 to 5 is leading to nighttime activities which are causing health, safety and wellbeing concerns for residents. A lot of those have contacted the councillors of the coastal area, and that's why Councillor Farrelly is putting this motion forward. Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other indications? No other indications, thank you. Item 15, questions by members of which due notice has been given. I have nil, and I have no new business of an urgent nature either. Item 17, matters behind closed doors. We have none of that. Brings us to item 18, which is closure of the meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 8:22 p.m. Thank you everyone for watching at home, and thanks to those members of the gallery who have stayed with us tonight as well. Thanks everyone.